Hey, what's up, what's up? Hope everyone's doing all right. So we are on week 11. No, sorry, week 10. And the reading is Deuteronomy 28 to Joshua 12. Um, so you kind of have the end of Deuteronomy. Um, and Moses just kind of goes over what the rules are and pretty much is like, okay, so if the children of Israel do well, they'll get God's blessings. If the children of Israel do bad, then they're going to get God's curses. And so they have these two different options of either blessings or curses, and it's for them to decide how they're going to live their life. And regardless of how they live their life, they're going to either get this good or bad thing. It doesn't appear that there's like a middle road, right? It's either blessings or cursings. There's no like, okay, in the middle. So I guess you hit this middle road when you're going from blessings to cursings. But it's inevitable that the cursings are going to happen. But if things start getting better, then it's inevitable things are going to get better and keep getting good until you get to the blessings. Um, Now the question arises now is that in the New Testament it talks about how if you are a Christian you're going to suffer persecution. And so but in the Bible, in the Old Testament, it talks about that people do well, then they're going to be blessed. So now if a Christian does well, is he going to be blessed? God, I pray that you help me answer this question. Or if a Christian does well, he's going to be cursed. What do you think? I think that if you are able to, if you're able to understand and accept what God's plan is in the Old Testament, then you get the blessings and you get the understanding of what God does. And so I think that if you can understand the Old Testament, 'cause the Old Testament is pretty hard. If you can accept it, what happened, and be okay with it and understand that God did this for a reason, then you will also be able to understand that God's going to bless you if you do well. Doesn't mean that you're not going to have persecution. You're still going to have persecution, but the ultimate part of you is going to do well. Now you have in the New Testament you have Paul, and he has letters, and in his letters it seems like he's having a troubled time and a lot of things that are happening to him. And so how can he be having a troubled time if he's going to get blessings too? Well, I think that Paul is a different Paul's a different person. He's not like an average Christian, right? He writes in the Bible, he does all this different stuff, and so he's not like an average Christian. So I think that if you are a average Christian, like an average Christian, if they do well, they're going to be blessed. They're going to get the blessings like the God's chosen people did in the Old Testament. So if they follow God's rules and follow His laws, then they're going to be blessed. If they don't follow God's laws and they don't follow His rules, then they're going to get the curse. They're going to get cursed. But if you're called to be like a prophet or a preacher, then you're going to suffer persecution. But all Christians also suffer persecution. Doesn't mean that they're not going to get the blessings that God gives them. So you're going to get the blessings of God, but you're going to get the curses of man. So people aren't going to like you necessarily. You're going to suffer the persecution that the world has to offer. What man offers you, what man does to you, if you're a Christian, but you're going to get the blessing that God gives you. Now, if you're playing the role of like Paul, then you're going to have the same kind of thing that happened with Paul. But nobody plays the role as Paul because there's only Paul. And he was such an important part in the Old Testament or the New Testament and writing all the rules and laws. And so I don't think the stuff that happens to Paul is going to happen to anybody. I think that if you're a Christian, you're going to be persecuted. I think that if you're like a prophet or you're outside like an average Christian or what God would consider like kind of the average Christian, like, what do you mean by average? Just like the majority of Christians face. But if you're outside of that average, then you're going to be, the more outside you are of that average, whatever that average is, the more different than your life is going to be. Concerning the the blessing that God gives you and the persecution that man does to you. And it also depends like on the society. So there's a lot of different factors. So you have like kind of this base foundation where if you do well, God's going to bless you. If you do well and you're a good Christian, then man's going to persecute you. This is kind of like this is kind of like the base. And then, or this is the base, I would imagine. And then depending on a lot of other factors, it's going to determine how your life is and how each event is. But that's kind of like the base. And, like, of course, Paul had all these bad things that happened to him, but Paul is Paul. And so we're not Paul, nor anybody really, nor can anybody be Paul. Maybe there are people that want to be like Paul. But you can't be Paul because Paul was already there, and he already had the rules and the things, and I guess like you don't want to take away from everything that he did and having to do it again. Like he suffered a lot, he did a lot, and so like why take away from that? And I think that when man is hurt, then God is sad. So you don't want to be Paul in the sense that you don't want to be one of God's beloved and then have people persecute you and hurt you, because then God gets hurt when that happens. So you don't really want to be persecuted. You don't want to be hurt, because although you'll get blessings for it, God's going to be sad because of it. Not only because of the pain that you have, and he doesn't want his children to be upset, but because of what he has to do to those that hurt you. So I don't think you want to be Paul because you don't want to be persecuted to that extent. But you have to accept that if you're a Christian, you're going to be persecuted by man. And if you can accept and understand the Old Testament, understand and accept what God has done, and that there was a reason for it, even though you don't understand it, then you can get the blessings that are promised to God's people that he promised in the Old Testament. But if you don't accept what God has done, and you can't accept the Old Testament, then you can't accept history, and you can't accept what God does to his people that are chosen, the society that's chosen. So the reason I keep going over that is I think that the Old Testament is very hard to accept. The slaughtering of men, women, and children in Joshua, and when they come into the different land, the promised land, is hard to accept, because you think of the women, children, and you have right now, and to have them just utterly killed is hard to accept that this is what God wants, and like why would he want that? And so I don't think you could understand it because it's such a different time and it's such a different environment. But you have to be able to accept it and have faith that there's a reason for it. Doesn't mean you have to be able to explain it, but I feel like you need to accept it. And without that accepting, then it's going to hurt you. Okay, so on Monday I have covenant and oath with the children of Israel. And so God has his covenant oath with the children of Israel, and so they're his people. But God never says that he's going to have a covenant oath with Christians like he did. Like this is the exact oath that he gives to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and his children. But he doesn't have this oath with Christians. But you have these guarantees that what Christians have, and you have this history of how God treats his people. So although God doesn't give an oath to Christians like he does to the Jews, you can see how God treats his people. And if you are God's people, then he's going to treat you similar. You're not Jews, but I mean, it talks about how Jews are ones that are circumcised of the heart. So in the New Testament, so you're in the sense that you're still God's chosen people, because you have the circumcision of the heart, not of the flesh, and that makes you God's people. And then the Old Testament is an example of how he treats his people and what he expects of his people. And so Tuesday I have Joshua, and I think Joshua is probably like the best general that's ever existed. He doesn't give a bunch of details of his war tactics, but the amount of land that he conquered for what he had is probably the best that's ever happened before. The most extreme, the most impressive, and it's because God had Joshua's back, and this was promised to the Jews, and his victories were because of God. And so because God was so much with him, that's why his victories, and he was the best, because I don't think there's been any other general, maybe besides David, where his victories are so secure. But Joshua seems more like a general. I would see Joshua as more like a general, and David is more like a king. And what's the difference between the two? I think David probably engaged in more politics, and Joshua was just straight battles. Although David had a ton of battles, he had generals and he had the mighty men of war that did a lot of his battles with him and kind of for him. He had like his generals, while Joshua was the general. And so I think that's kind of the difference between the two. So as far as the best general of all time was, I would imagine it was probably Joshua. And as far as the best king of all time, I would give that to David. And there's not really any recording of anything that Joshua did that was wrong. Like, I don't really see anything in the Bible where Joshua did anything that was like bad. But I think that he had a lot of power because he had a lot of power, and so did Moses. I would imagine he made mistakes just like everyone else made mistakes. They're just not recorded. We don't need to know them. David made mistakes, and I think David is like the example. Although he did really well, I think that he's probably, he's talked about the most. His life is examined the most, and I like David. I mean, I like David. I mean, I like Elijah. I like a lot of them. I just think that David is like his life is examined the most. We see a lot of his mistakes that he makes, and they're recorded. And we don't need to. I think that a lot of the great men, or the powerful men, the men that God gives power to, fall into a lot of the same mistakes as David did. So we don't need to see them have the same. We don't need to have a history of the mistakes that they made. We can just see that with David, and like I said, I would imagine they had similar ones. And the thing is, though, and we know that Joshua made mistakes because all men are evil and all men make mistakes. So we definitely know that he made mistakes. We're just not recorded what exactly they were. And so Wednesday, I have water stood up when the Israelites crossed to the promised land. And so this isn't commercial Christianity doesn't talk too much about this, but when he goes to the promised land, he goes over there, and he, as soon as God tells him what he's going to do, but as soon as the priests they're bearing the ark go into the water stands up. So this is similar to when they were passing out of Egypt. Of course, the water doesn't swallow the people behind that are following them, but it's very similar. And when they're going through the water, he has 12 people grab 12 stones and put them on the shore to remember what happened on that day. And so he has these events that take place, and he likes to have, or God seems to like to have, take tokens of these events so that people can remember them. And so it's important that God did this, and he tells that this happens. And so it's important for us to take this and do kind of the same things, I think, at least, is to have events and then have memories of these events, and so that they can record them. When people ask about this, you can ask about it, or you can tell them about it. And so Thursday I have Jericho, and I think once again, this is kind of, unless God gives you things in your life to be able to know that he's real, then you'll see things like the city of Jericho, and it's hard to have faith that this happened, where they circled the city and then they shouted and the walls fall down. And if you don't have faith, then you just think this is kind of silly. At least in the past I would, or I did, and maybe I don't remember exactly, but now I don't see it as like, okay, this is silly, or this didn't happen. It's like, why did this happen? And how this look like happening, not if, but it's very real to me, and it's very obvious that it's possible, and it's that it happened. And just the city of Jericho, and then just be such an extreme event. And then you have excuse me, I forget the name of the girl, but you have the prostitute that saves the two people that scout in there, and they're saved, and she's saved, her family's saved, and they're brought into the Jews' way, into the Jew society. And so you definitely have this thing where if you're a prostitute, doesn't mean you're an evil person, because obviously this person wasn't evil, and they saved the Jews, and they were saved. I mean, we're all evil, but it doesn't mean that you're any more evil than someone else. She might have been the most righteous person there, the only righteous person there, but due to the environment that she's in, this is like the only option for her. She might have just been forced to be this, even though she didn't want to. And so I think that's when you definitely, if you see people that are in questionable lines of work, or and areas that seem questionable, it's like, well, I mean, do they have a choice, right? And then when they are given a choice for a different way, do they choose that choice? Do they choose that path of a different way, or to stay the same path they're at? So though you might be a drug addict or a criminal or a prostitute, you go against the laws. When you're offered an alternative route, do you take that route, or do you stick with the same route that you're already in? If you have the option and you don't take it, this is evidence of your character. And then so Friday I have the Lord God of Israel fought for Israel, and so this is obvious in all the events that take place. And then Joshua just takes out a lot of kings, and there's still a lot of battles to be had after Joshua 12. And so Joshua 13, we're getting to there next. And so there's just a lot of different fighting. It's a lot of different battles that take place. And it's like, you get to this point, I feel like in life where it's like, okay, God leads me, but it's like, man, he keeps leading me, he keeps helping me, he keeps protecting me. But without him, if he's not with me every moment, then I'm gonna die. I'm gonna lose everything. I'm gonna be in a lot of trouble. I'm gonna be in a lot of pain. And so you have like this worry that if God doesn't show up, then you're gonna be in a world of trouble. And so you're just like waiting for God to show up and waiting for God to be there. And instead of if you are there, you are you. So you're always gonna be there. And so if it's up to you, then it's like a different type of feeling. But to know that you're weak, and so on your power you might not be able to take it, but God's super strong, so he can take it no matter. He doesn't get sick. So whatever is happening, you can rely on him. And so it's just it's an interesting relationship. It's an interesting dynamic between man and God, for sure. And so you just always have to rely on God, and you just pray for his mercy and hope that you don't incur his vengeance. So that's what I have for this week. And remember, it's Deuteronomy 28 through Joshua 12, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday have a different theme that we go over, and we go through the Bible in 50 weeks. First week, or the first full week of the year, and then you read about 14 pages. I have it in here, and then you get through the Bible in 50 weeks, and so you do that every year, and you get through the Bible in every year. And the last weeks of the year, you can just rest. And so that's what we're doing, and that's what we should be doing pretty much every year. And it helps with the growth. And the Bible is meant to be read, I feel like, at least cover to cover, because you need to have context. And if you don't read the Bible cover to cover, just like if you don't read chapter from the beginning of the chapter to the end of the chapter, then you're not going to have references. You're not going to have context. And the same thing with the books. If you don't read Matthew from the first chapter to the last chapter, and you just kind of read it piece by piece, you're not going to have context. And so the Bible, the same way, you have to read it, I feel like, at least from cover to cover, and that way you have context of the events that happen and take place. All right, so that's like I said, that's we're on week 12, Deuteronomy 28 through Joshua 12. Hopefully everyone is doing okay. God bless, and happy truth seeking.